Gretchen, come and share with us the owner survey. And as she comes, let's give her a good CII CURT welcome. Thank you, Gretchen.
Oh gosh, it's so wonderful to be here. I realize that I'm the only thing between you all and connect time. Is that code for beer and wine, Palmer? Okay. Just wanted to make sure. So I promise you, if you stay until the end of this presentation, I'll buy you a drink at the cocktail party tonight. How does that sound for a deal? So it's great to be back. I actually, just to give you a little bit of history, I started the owner study back in the 90s. I'm going to date myself. And when I was at FMI, I started out doing strategy work with large construction and engineering firms. I was hired in '94 after a career running manufacturing plants. And I quickly realized that the owners were the ones that were really going to drive change in the industry. Not that the contractors, you contractors and engineering firms aren't, but you can be very strategic. And if you're working for an owner that doesn't get it, things aren't going to go well. And I started this study because I really wanted to take the time to thoughtfully understand what was on the minds of owners. And it's funny, I went and found the 1998 version of it, and I was going to show it to you, but I look so young in my headshot, it made me just feel really old. But yeah, 1998. We have a lot of things to say, and I say we because I'm up here speaking for the 44 people that I interviewed for this study. I don't think I've ever done the entire study myself, but I did this year. I interviewed 44 people around the world, Europe, Australia, Asia, the United States, because I think this is a really pivotal time for our industry. And everything that we've heard so far at this conference tells us that. So these are some of the companies. You'll recognize these logos. These are some of the companies that participated in the study. And interestingly, this year, I also made a decision to expand it beyond owners. With the pandemic, with all we've been through, I really wanted a bit of a more holistic idea of what was happening in our industry. So 24 of the respondents were owners, 12 were AEC, large AEC, and then we had 8 influencers. So like Jan Tuckman, editor-in-chief of E&R Magazine, people that really kind of have a broad perspective on it. I also wanted to look at the diversity of whose voices I was lifting up. We had 7% people of color, and interestingly, we had 22 women and 22 men. When have you ever seen anything involving construction be split 50-50 male and female? So I really wanted to look at the diversity of these leaders that were contributing to the study. This is a beach. I just spent 2 weeks on this beach in Australia. I was only supposed to be in Australia for 2 years, and we extended it to 5 because there's 10,000 beaches in Australia with a population the size of Texas. And I went and I usually do about a 4-day retreat. I did a 12-day retreat this year by myself. And my theme for this retreat was about the rocks in my jar. So has anybody gone through this exercise of thinking about the big rocks in your jar? This was my sole focus. And I love this picture because if your jar gets too filled up with sand and little rocks, there's no room for the big rocks. There's no room for the big rocks, the big priorities in your life. And that's what I went away to think about for 12 days. What are my big priorities? Greg was just asking me, when are you moving back to the United States? Next year is the answer to that. And I want you to think. We have heard so much information. We are in a confined space. I know you've got people emailing you and calling you, et cetera. But what are your big rocks? Like, what are the big priorities that you're going to take away from this conference? And I was reminded of a podcast I did with Mike Stahn. People remember Mike Stahn, Procter & Gamble, retired? And I did a podcast with him because he drew the line about 2 or 3 years before his retirement and said, we are going to implement 6 lean practices on every project globally. At the time, I was president of Continuum Advisory Group, and Kelsey and Clark, I think you're out there somewhere, we helped them implement that. And in the podcast, I asked Mike, I said, Mike, you're 2 years away from retirement. That's what caused you to stick your neck out so far? And he said some of the same things that were just said on this panel and had been said. I knew there was a better way to do things, and somebody had to have the courage to draw a line in the sand and say, we're going to do things in a different way. So I'd encourage you to think about not everything you've heard at this conference, but what are the 1 or 2 big rocks? If not us, who? Who is going to do this? When we talk about leading change in our industry, I went back to the 2016 study. This is an actual slide from that presentation. And interestingly, we asked you all about the future volatility of the industry. That's that red line, and you said, oh gosh, it's going to be really volatile. Little did we know we were going to have a pandemic, right? Didn't even realize that was going to happen. And the yellow bar on the bottom, we asked you, how well do you manage change? I think it was Brent Darnell they were referencing that said the only people who like change is a baby with a wet diaper. And you rated yourselves below average. And we asked you, organization agility, this ability to rapidly change, and just a little bit above average. So we know the industry is going to be more volatile. We know we don't do change that well. So the first question I went to, and we have an audience poll. This is audience participation. If you pull out your phone in your app, I'm going to purposely ask you to pull your phones out, and you click on this session, there are 9 audience polls. So your voice is going to be added to the voices of those people I interviewed for the white paper that's going to be created from the study. How well did our industry show agility in reacting to the pandemic? So if you can take a moment, find the app, find the session. It should be poll number 1. We're going to do 9 of them. And how well did we show agility in reacting to the pandemic? These are the actual results from the study. The average was 3.1, pretty good. We had mostly 3s and 4s, a couple of outliers, 1s and 2s, and it's interesting, I split this one up between owners, AEC, and influencers. We had about the same reaction. We did pretty well in reacting to the pandemic. Some of the things we said about it, we were the people who actually did the work while the entire world was fearful. I give you all so much credit for getting out there early on and making things happen. It was heroic, the number of people rising to the occasion. From a Friday to a Monday, 8,000 people became remote. We lobbied to be essential and kept the economy going. We were making payments to people, right? We figured out how to be productive at home. Large contractors collaborated to keep things going. We built a hospital in Brazil in 40 days, Colombia in 2 months. 85 to 90% of the jobs kept working with few outbreaks on site. We kept people healthy and had our best safety year ever. That was from one of the largest engineering construction firms in the world. All but one project paused in a controlled way. We had no increases in outages or emergency response time. And we navigated onerous border restrictions. That had to be an Australian comment. You've been keeping up on what's going on in Australia. You still can't go to Perth. I live in Melbourne and I can't travel to Perth, but I can come to the United States. We could do this because our industry is good in a crisis. Everyone aligns. The common enemy is the challenge. If we want to change, we're pretty good at it. We have a can-do attitude. We deal with problems all the time. Our industry is skilled at adapting to crisis. So we're really good in times of challenge. But people in the study also talked about some of our challenging systemic issues in our industry. Our industry has done business the same way for a very long time. By the way, I should have pointed this out. If there's a little O at the end of the quote, it's an owner saying it. If there's a little AEC at the end, it's an AEC, and if it's an I, it's an influencer. So you can tell which segment is saying something. But the business model does not encourage change. This is kind of funny. Well, it's really not kind of funny, but we started the CURT Lean Committee in 2004 and said, it can't take 25 years. It's taking longer, and it's hard to measure progress at times. We are a dinosaur with lots of bureaucracy, and our supply chain is unable to manage change. We crave change, but it's hard to implement to turn the aircraft carrier. We are a cumbersome industry with little desire to change, We make technical pivots but don't understand the cultural shifts that need to go with it. We are the most rigid industry out there, and at the moment we are still stuck in the old ways. It's like trying to turn the Titanic. We had supply chain issues. We went back to can we yell and scream our way out of it tactics. The trades were not being transparent, and it's hard to bend in the middle. We have language around change, but it's hard to decide what change should happen. So the fundamental result is that no change happens. And the pandemic exposed holes in risk management. We need to redesign the system to withstand shock, to not be fragile, but stronger in chaos. Anybody think any of these quotes? I mean, these are your peers speaking to you about our industry. It's tough to hear sometimes. I say I have a love-hate relationship, but I really do love this industry. I even tried to leave it for a while and came back. They talked about unique owner challenges, and Ed was just talking about this on this panel. We have many regions, everyone has an opinion. It makes it hard to align, it's hard to develop metrics to use and a database of information for decisions because each project is so unique. We have individual businesses within our organization, and it's hard to drive change. So you think of some of these large global owners that are trying to convince multiple business units to do things in a different way. We move fast and throw money at problems. That was one owner's statement. And speed to market is critical. One project is $25 million over budget, 7 months behind schedule, and now the market's declining. We don't have visibility to constraints. We also had comments about GCs and trades. Trades are faster at change. Owners and GCs are slower. GCs are not listening to the trades, not open to, and I use the term GC, they may have said CM. GC needs to listen versus dictating. The specialties are more open to change than the GCs who are rewarded based on the traditional system. I thought this was a really insightful statement. The government and owners have a massive responsibility to drive change. Someone has to put the stake in the ground. And as I told you, I started the owner services group back in 1996 at FMI because I really felt it was going to be the owners that were going to drive change. So these are the questions that I would have you contemplate while I go through the 6 key themes that came out of the study. Owners, how do you as a construction delivery arm, remember they have clients, owners have clients internal to their organizations to drive the ability to be agile. What change are you demanding? What stake are you willing to put in the ground? You know, I think about Jim Ellis. I don't know if Jim is in here. It's really difficult to see who's in here when you're speaking. Talking to us in August about sustainability and those bold goals. If you're an AEC, I would think about how do you continue to add value in the supply chain? What is your role in driving change in the industry? So 6 key themes. These came out of these 44 interviews. And once again, I want to encourage you to think about what are my big rocks? What are the important things that are being discussed in this study? And what can I do to lead change in our industry? So the first one was technology. This is audience poll number 2. Are you getting the hang of this? Great. How's everybody doing? Are we hanging in out there? Did I put this vision of beer and wine in your mind and now that's all you're thinking about? It's out there. How well are we doing at adopting technology in our industry? I'm really curious about this. And unfortunately, this polling mechanism doesn't have live results. But as I said, the results of these will all be written into the white paper, which will be done in about 30 days. It's funny, if you went through my slides ahead of time, you wondered, why in the heck does Gretchen have a picture of a young child's toy in this presentation? I was giving a keynote speech back in the 90s, maybe late 2000s, at a technology conference. John Bedrosic had asked me to come out and speak at his company user group. And I was on the plane thinking about this. Most of us either had this toy, or a child had this toy, or maybe even we have grandchildren having these toys. And I was thinking about the fact that when you hand a kid the hammer, what do they do with it first? Eat it. They stick it in their mouth, they stick the other end in their mouth, they might poke at the peg. They don't know. It's not like you hand them the hammer and they go, oh, this is a hammer and that's a peg. Boom. That's how we do this, right? And I was thinking about technology in a very, in a similar way. And this was in the early 2000s. I mean, 20 years ago. Oh my God. Does anyone else in this room just wonder how so many decades have gone by that we've been in the industry, right? The good news from the study, we had some great comments. The use of drones is great. A Nigeria update was almost like being there in person. Technology has improved communication throughout our offices. We have a focus on BIM. Two strong statements. BIM has to happen to keep owner costs down. I was shocked and amazed. I guess I wasn't shocked and amazed, but to be reminded that BIM's been around for 20 to 25 years, right? We're not the early adopters. We are not willing to pay for BIM. This is an owner saying this. We are not willing to pay for BIM. Owners need to push lean, automation, and robotics. So it was an owner. In our breakout about sustainability, Teresa Magnus asked a great question of Jim Ellis. Are you willing to pay for sustainability? So are you willing to pay for BIM, et cetera? But here are some of our challenges when it comes to technology. Owners are asking for rigorous digital delivery ahead of its time. It's making people crazy, costing dollars, and we don't get the benefit at the beginning of technology adoption. We're on a journey together, and owners are pretty rational about it. So being rational about the challenges. The trades are faster at adopting technology like LiDAR scans from helmet tops. We need to take humans out of dangerous work. We need to really use the available technology like robots marking floors at night. Tech solutions are not end-to-end, they're siloed. Cybersecurity is a huge issue. I actually have a client in Australia, an engineering firm that just had all their data stolen and ransomed back to them. So it does happen out there. Shifting everyone globally to a new technology is a challenge. We lack alignment. Technology is not making us faster because we are swimming in data. So my question to you is, now is the time for change. When I think about standing up and giving that keynote 20 years ago, and I think about where we are in technology adoption, how will you be the hero or the heroine, I should have put that in there, in technology? Is this one of the big rocks for your jar? Is this something for you or your team or your organization that you need to say, we are going to figure this out in a different way and overcome some of these challenges? All right, let's talk about asset sustainability. I'm not sure I use exactly because it's about resilience too. Asset sustainability, like are assets actually going to be in place in 50 years? So audience poll number 3, you guys need to help me keep track of what number we're on. How important is asset sustainability as an industry issue? With 1 being low and 4 being high, how important is this as an issue? I'll give you just a second to answer that. I'm a huge golfer. I knew I was going to face some challenges when I moved to Australia. This is an actual picture I took on the #1 course in Australia on King Island. I never knew I'd be playing a golf course where you had a poison snake kit under your... Anybody else played a course with a sign that has this on there? I lost 8 balls that day. I did not go in the tall grass after my balls, and the guy said, well, I don't think we've had to use it in a while. I did see poisonous snakes too. This is another actual picture that I took in Australia. This is January of 2020, trying to get to the coast for New Year's Eve when we were having the bushfires, and my husband and I being turned around at a highway because a swift-moving bushfire was coming. I was glad I wasn't in the middle of it. Back in that time frame in Australia, 46 million acres burned. 46 million, the same size as the country of Syria. 80% of the Blue Mountain World Heritage burned. 34 people died. I experienced my first earthquake last year. I live on the 7th floor of a 16-story building in Melbourne, Australia, and I was in it when the earthquake hit. That picture is taken a 5-minute walk from my house. I don't ever want to be in an earthquake again. Not a fun feeling, right? I looked up some statistics. I'll get to those in just a minute. this was one of the key comments that showed me how important this issue is becoming in our industry. The one and only thing we need to pay attention to is climate change. Floods, fires, roofs, blown off houses. Climate issues are a critical challenge. We're seeing it in site selection for data centers and other types of projects. This is a large contractor saying this. Site selection and sustainability issues are increasingly important. People talk about ESG, they need to talk about the planet. We've instituted environmental impact contingency plans on every job site for fires, rain in Portland, things like the pandemic. We've budgeted for air scrubbers and we're keeping plywood on hand for hurricanes. ESG is being forced upon us. Environmental sustainability is a critical issue. Climate threat and global warming are huge issues. So how are we helping our planet not just be sustainable like was discussed in the sustainability breakout today, but ensuring that our assets are actually going to physically be there, not burned down, not, we have the permafrost melting in Russia and the roads and the pipelines are buckling. These are the disaster trends that I looked up. We've had 14 separate US billion-dollar disasters in 2019. This was the latest data they had. It's the fourth highest tied with 18, 17, and 16. And we've had 69 separate billion-dollar disaster events. I'm really a cheerful person. This is really a good setup for the Connect time. I don't mean to be the bearer of such bad news, but it'll be interesting to see how you all feel, how important you think this is. So once again, the time for change is now. How will you be in the hero or the heroine of this story? Is this one of the big rocks that you need to be putting more focus and more prioritization on? All right, supply chain. Oh, how could we not talk about supply chain right now, right? Supply chain and estimating, probably no surprise to anybody. This is kind of a different question for you in your audience poll. How long are we going to be dealing with supply chain issues? 1 to 3 years, 4 to 6 years, 6 plus issues. What poll number are we on? 4? Awesome. Poll number 4. How long are we going to be dealing with supply chain issues? So some of the challenges that were discussed, this kind of sums it all up, right? Supply chain is all messed up. I actually live overlooking the harbor of Melbourne, and I see all the cargo ships coming in and out with all the supplies, and it is all messed up. One owner said, we sourced 80% of one piece in India and Malaysia to save $2,000 and never thought about increased risk to supply chain. International trade issues are a concern. We focused on more local versus global ecosystems. This is a really interesting point here. Missing a 25-cent part in a cable tray caused a 3-month delay. This is from an owner. Just 2 weeks ago, when I first got to America, I was visiting a $72 million multifamily project. I just became chair of the board of Brinkman Construction. And during the job site, in the visit, they were talking about, well, we've pre-sourced the appliances and we've pre-sourced this and it's all being stored in this and this and this. And I said, it's really great to think about the big things, but what are the little things that are going to trip you up? And I think that's a great example of it, that a part that costs 25 cents could cause a 3-month delay on a massive, I'm going to guess, was probably about a $500 million project because of this cable tray clip being gone. I tried to order something with crab in it in Kansas City. They said they haven't had crab in 45 days. Anybody else having a crab shortage where you live? I had no idea. So definitely focusing on more domestic. Our supply chain is fragmented and has an inability to manage change. Estimating challenges. Project pricing is a guesstimate at best. This is an owner comment. It's about dealing with price volatility and how risk is managed. Our general conditions were written in 1955 and don't address today's issues. By the way, this is a very substantial owner in transportation. We're seeing spikes in pricing and our contingencies are inadequate. We didn't make decisions in time. We need an open mind to complexity, and it starts with price realism. Inflation is a concern. We heard Lots about that on Iban yesterday. A $27 million project in 2020 is now $30 million. The tightening of the bond market will create less access to capital, and price volatility is a concern. We'll have to assess risk in a new way and are very concerned with unpredictability. So everybody is facing this supply chain. I picked 3 words, and it's interesting because these happen to be 3 words that we've been thinking about, because I thought, gosh, how do we deal with supply chain and pricing volatility? And we're all facing it, and it's going to be around for a while. I think we need to buckle in for a bit of a bumpy road. And the 3 words I picked are words that we've been talking about for the last day: integration, collaboration, and transparency. I would love to be standing up here giving a speech in 5 years that we've greatly improved the transparency in the supply chain of our industry. I think it's about time. I think the time for change is now. And I really applaud OS 2.0. Thank you for the shout out, Stephen. That was a lot of fun to work with Stephen on that. But I feel like we're at a tipping point to solve some of these challenges. The time for change is now. Is this one of your big rocks? How are you going to tackle some of these things with your organization? Number 4, power. This is for the owners only. I only want the owners answering this question. Truthfully, please truthfully, contractors are out to make as much money as they can or not to be trusted. I had to throw this in as a question. I just had to see what kind of honest response I got from the audience on this. I talk about trade challenges. We treat craft like they're dispensable. Trades are not being transparent. We talked about that earlier. It's hard to bend in the middle. GCs are not listening to trades. We talk about we're working to build trust. Why do we, this is an owner speaking, why do we think the contractor is out to get us? Perhaps volume of money, fragmented supply chain, false sense of cost from the get-go. So that goes to that price realism to begin with, right? I heard these contractor people are so hard to deal with. So we set up regular meetings, and guess what? They're not hard to deal with. We are not here to beat up the contractor, but when people have less field knowledge, there is more potential for this. Owners have made it impossible for small businesses to work with us with 180-day payment terms. We've heard people talking about that as well. Industry as a whole doesn't talk about what really matters, and I hope that we will. And I think that's the important part of conferences like this, of really taking the time to think strategically and talk about what really matters. Owners make the difference. A supportive owner, when they get it, we need their support to make it work, treating us like human beings. Often the plan, the budget, and schedule isn't right from the start. The procurement people are not aligned with the project people, just trying to get the best price. Inexperienced buyers are either, this is an owner saying this, inexperienced buyers are either wink wink with the PM or low bid, because they don't know, they implied, this person that I interviewed, that they don't know what they're doing. These are master-servant relationships that start with the procurement models. Master-servant relationships. We are really hard on contractors. Supply chain and estimating issues reinforce the stigma that the construction industry, that people are out to hoodwink us. It reinforces old perceptions versus being partners. We treat trade expertise as a commodity. So I think that really goes back to the transparency. But people talked in uplifting ways about some of the solutions that are happening when it comes to these power relationships. You know what helps us? Really good, longer-term strategic relationships with vendors that improve everyone and provide greater transparency. It's not standard practice, and but it's getting better. Trust issues remain. We heard a lot about trust from that last panel. I love that you're using Stephen Covey's Speed of Trust book. What an awesome book. It's in our culture, our contractual norms, our ways of working. People are protective of transparency, worried about liabilities and potential claims. We need to reduce the number of transactions and ensure each party is successful. We need to stop treating builders like commodities and treat them like a partner. Acknowledge the impact your project has on people's lives. We need to support each other. Mistakes are going to happen. Support each other no matter what. That's a large owner saying that. We need to research our AEC partners. You get what you pay for. We need to stop thinking transactionally and start thinking strategically about what win-win looks like. We need to create a new narrative, a new value proposition. Remember, these are the voices of your peers. What can we do together that we can't do separately? We are so fragmented, we need a more integrated approach. And looking how we optimize the business and the human side of what we do. So once again, I think master-servant relationships, doesn't feel like a completely positive, productive way to think about the power structure within our industry. And is this something that should be a big rock in your jar? All right, 2 more themes. People, people, people. How critical is the labor shortage issue? I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask this question anyway. It's poll number 5. How critical is the labor shortage issue? Poll number 5 in your app. Oh, 6. Thank you. See, I told you were going to have to keep me on track of what poll it is. All right, here's what your peers had to say. Lack of skilled labor resulting in poor workmanship, poor safety behaviors. It's hard when restaurant workers think they can come into the construction without being trained. We need to focus on attracting, training, retraining. Anirban talked about the skills mismatch yesterday in his presentation. I wish I thought of the James Bond theme. That was really kind of cool, right? But when you have a name like Bond, Anirban, you can do things like that, I guess. The Great Resignation is a significant challenge. Great people not coming back. People are less qualified. We're running out of people in Arizona and Texas. For the first time in years, we're having trouble hiring. Erosion of skilled craft when it comes to attracting people. We are 3rd from the bottom. Even exotic dancing is more desirable. I'm not sure about that. I think I'd vote no on that one. On one project, we had 5 different PMs, 4 for the CM, and 3 different project executives. This is an owner talking about a project. People can work at Walmart for $25 an hour. Why would they want to come work for us? We need to start designing a better environment for our own employees. Young people don't want to get into our field. How can we collectively as leaders impact this image challenge we have with our industry? And people are job shopping. I don't know if you're experiencing that with your companies, but people are out. This was an owner quote I thought was interesting. We're losing schedule because we can't get the number of people we need. They left because of COVID and they're not coming back. People want to feel needed and wanted instead of just a body. First, we need to create a culture where you care about people as they are our #1 resource. We need to step into battle with them and support them no matter what. And that's everybody through the field and making them feel cared about. Is prefabrication and modular construction a solution? People talked about that. Shortages will drive greater productivity, more modularization. It's like that templatization thing you all are talking about. More hours in a fixed nice yard that's cool to work in. Through prefabrication, this is one owner looking to eliminate 35 to 50% of their on-site labor. This is a tech owner. Safety and quality are better with prefab. We can build it where the people are and ship it to them. But I thought it was really interesting, this there's a recent Dodge data analytics report, and it says contractors continue to say that architects and engineers are not adequately enabling prefabrication in their design solutions. And the design professionals are saying that there's a lack of prefabrication facilities close to their projects. So once again, we have kind of this going on. You engineers aren't making it happen. Well, you all don't have the prefab to do it, so we're not going to put that solution in. How do we get further up front and impact value in design? Okay, we can't talk about people without talking about diversity. Brent Darnell and Katina did a great breakout on diversity today. This is poll number 6. Am I keeping track of this? 7, no, I'm not. I flunk. 7, how well are we doing at improving the diversity of our industry? How well are we doing at improving the diversity of our organization, of our industry? What do you think the score was from the people that I asked this of? 3, 2, 1, I hear it all. 1.85. Influencers were at a 1.9. AEC was at 1.5. Owners at a 2.0. You can see we're all over the board. There's some people that rated at a 4. Somebody asked me if they could rate it a -2. I said no, there's no -2 on the scale. It's interesting, Melbourne, Australia is in a state called Victoria. It was very confusing when I moved to Australia to figure out what all the states were. Luckily, they only have 7 states and territories, I think. This just happened in December, where the government has put goals in place, quotas actually they call them, for women in construction. What do you think the quota is for women in trades in this mandate? What percentage? 5. Anybody want to go higher than 5? 10? Yeah, it's 3. It's 3, and people are up in arms about it. Oh, we can't possibly hit 3. And it's like, okay, I think for project managers and project engineers, it might be 35%. So it's a little bit higher. So you're seeing some governments that are starting to mandate things related to diversity. And I heard diversity success stories. We have a long way to go, but I see a lot more good intentions. Inclusion was not in our vernacular, but kids today are acclimated to it. That's an owner. This is an acknowledgement of the reality that diversity makes a difference, that diverse teams are better at problem solving and innovation. Lots of research on this. We're working hard on diversity, and this owner is 50-50 men and women through a deliberate strategy that includes outreach with our PMs and CMs teaching at local high schools. So this is a very large owner that their staff is 50% male, 50% female, but very deliberate strategy. This is a contractor. Last week, for the first time, our top college recruits were 50-50 men, women, and my top 3 choices were women. First time ever. And I'm always trying to find success stories, and I heard from one of the people I interviewed that Canada's doing a great job. So they've set a goal of 30% women in their trades. In some of their areas, they're achieving, let's see, what was this one? They're 13%. Tradeswomen. I was telling somebody at lunch the story. I just did a podcast with a gentleman in Australia. They were building a girls' school, and the contractor went into his construction team in a meeting and said, we're going to have 50% women on this job site. What do you think the reaction was when he told his team that they were going to have 50% women on the job site? We can't have we'll never be able to accomplish that. They actually got to 53% women on a construction site. Trained female caisson drillers. I think I'm going to show you some podcasts at the end, but I am in Spotify under Greatness if you want to find my podcast. So the challenges, we've been 12.5% women, 2% in the trades for 35 years. We can't keep talking about it. We need fundamental change, including no more porn in lunch sheds. Okay, we still have a porn problem in Australia, in the lunch sheds. We need to have more flexibility in order to support a diverse workforce, including childcare closer to site or on-site. Somebody was telling a story about B&K doing that years ago. We need to understand what it means to really welcome diverse people. We have a transgender woman on site, and I'm not sure her needs are being taken care of. We are not statistically representing the communities we work in. If there's only one person that looks like them, they won't stick around. It's hard to think outside the box, but we need to hold people accountable for diversity. If men are staying until 7 o'clock, women are doing the pickup and drop off. We need women to flourish. Women diffuse aggression. Owners are driving diversity more than our vendors, who must be willing to do it. So once again, the time for change is now. I left the industry for 8 years, mostly to finish raising my kids. I needed to get off a plane for a while. And I came back 8 years later in 2013, and I thought, oh my gosh, we're still talking about this. The person I did the podcast with that had the 50-50 men and women, at the end of the podcast, he says, in 5 years, I don't think diversity will be a problem. And I said, well, Andre, I will drink champagne with you if 5 years from now, diversity is not a problem in our industry. So what can you do to push the needle on that? All right, last but not least, safety, and it certainly isn't least. And I saved it for last because I think this is one of the most important messages, and it really builds upon a presentation we saw here in August in Orlando. So 5,333 workers died on the job in the United States in 2019. 1 in 5 deaths is in the construction industry. Of the 42 annual crane-related deaths, 60% involve a falling object. A total of 1,000 construction workers died on the job in 2020. Each year, 10.2 of every 100,000 construction workers suffer a fatal injury, which is the 3rd highest of any industry. What do you think causes 300 of those 1,000 deaths? Louder. Falls. Falls account for 34% of all construction deaths. Eliminating falls would save more than 300 lives a year. We know how to stop falls, right? I think we've kind of figured that out. And, but it's not, so we've focused so much attention on the physical safety. I wanted to really ask questions about the mental well-being of our employees. So help me, what poll number is this? 8, all right. How well do we take care of our employees' mental well-being in the construction industry? How well do we take care of our employees' mental well-being in the construction industry? Thanks for humoring me with these polls. I thought, wow, I can collect a lot more data for this paper. 1.8 was our answer. Once again, you had, a couple of, I think 3.5 is the highest. A lot of 1s, but really clustered mostly down in that 1 and 2 from the people that responded in the interviews. COVID did show compassion. There were great comments. COVID created compassion for our home lives. It was an intimate time. People couldn't hide the bad days. I don't know how long that will stick. That was the key to that comment. COVID exposed the humanity of our employees. We are all in this together, all sharing the same pain. We're worried about people in a holistic way. People in their own lives have suffered and felt anguish. That has made us more sympathetic. So one silver lining out of COVID. These were the toughest stories to hear during these interviews. It's a tough, manly industry. We don't want to admit weakness. We recently lost a contract CM support to suicide. A trade person committed suicide in his truck at the job entrance last month. The AGC is not advocating enough. 3 months ago, we had a suicide in our job site hotel. We treat craft like they are dispensable. 3 of 44 people had experienced a suicide in the last 3 months. Very difficult to hear these stories. And this is the slide I saw when I was here in August. I didn't write down the number, research 372 maybe? Anybody in the room that was from this presentation? 370, oh my gosh, I was only off by 2. Thank you. That 4 to 5 times more people die from suicide than die from job site injury in our industry. And suicide, we are the #1 industry for suicide in Australia as well. This was an interesting exchange I had with one of the people I interviewed. They said a mechanical contractor recently submitted a change order for mental distress. I said, what happened? And he said, well, it was promptly thrown out. It's not in the contract. Did anyone go talk to the contractor to see how they're doing? That was my next question, right? Wow, I should do that. I haven't gone back to see if he actually talked to the contractor. I think it takes a lot of guts to turn in a change order for mental distress, right? And this was a contractor's comment. I wish they would ask us how accelerating the schedule will impact our people. We need to stop shouting safety and whispering mental health. There is a lot of stress, and I was doing it directly, expecting people to eat stress for breakfast. We need an appropriate work-life balance. The jerk on the job site causes a ripple effect. The team culture is critical. We need to recognize it's important. We need the psychological safety to say, I need help. Athletes like Simone Biles are setting a great example. When we have an issue, we deal with it, but it's a macho construction industry, and it's tough to ask, how are you doing? Are you mentally present? It's viewed as a weakness. For 30 years, it's never been top of mind. That's an owner. You have to really love it to do it. Somebody said that yesterday. People need to feel needed and wanted versus being a body. We need to give people the skills to see it, just like under the influence. We need to create openness and eliminate stigma. Government and owners could push harder on this. I think a lot of people in the industry are misunderstood. The language is overtly rough. But there are great humans. There are great. We have wonderful people in our industry. We need to make space for mental health. So-and-so's losing it today. We just expect people to lose it. We have exceptional people that push themselves very hard. It's a good old boy industry, and we grind it out. It has to start with the owner, what they are asking of people that put the work in place. You need to understand what you're asking the men and women to do. Do we really need this date? It's a tough, cutthroat business, and people lose perspective. Things like liquidated damages and owners threatened because of schedule. I did hear good. I think we're at a tipping point on this. As I said, I think we're at a great inflection point in our industry on a lot of critical issues. Maybe we are about to be aware, to take a turn. I think it's sinking in. Efforts are few and far between, but I hear other leaders beginning to talk about it. People are getting the message, and we are destigmatizing talking about it. We've trained our supervisors for the signs to look for. Our safety award, this is a really critical point. Our safety award program for the first year had 2 awards for helping people in mental distress. We need owner support to make it work, as owners that get it and treat us like human beings make the difference. Our team in Australia, this was actually an American talking to me, our team in Australia is doing better than the US with regular mental health check-ins at the start of every meeting. That's a large engineering firm. We've trained all of our superintendents to be aware of the symptoms from a behavioral aspect and how to handle it. We give our employees 3 mental health days a year. There's more of a general awareness in society about this. For the last decade, this is a large construction company, for the last decade, we've trained people to be connectors with a 2-day training course and stickers to identify them to help with mental well-being. So lots of good things. This is a program in Australia called Mates in Construction that was started to address the suicide challenge in Australia. I want to give Teresa Magnus. Teresa, where are you? See Teresa waving right there? Go talk to her during the cocktail party. She got fed up with the suicide thing and wrote a darn book. With a partner, a psychologist. I have a podcast with them as well, and they're piloting this on 2 projects right now to do self-directed mental well-being programs with trade workers. I mean, to really take care of them mentally as well as physically. Congratulations. I want to ask the owners only, this is your last poll. Have you heard of the AGC's culture of care? Just the owners, because I started asking this during the interviews. Owners. Tell me, have you heard of the AGC culture of care? Good. Anybody a no? So hundreds of construction firms have signed up for the culture of care. We have Inclusivity Week now, so we're seeing, I just pulled this screenshot off of their website. I actually sit on the Construction Industry Culture Task Force for the country of Australia. We've developed a culture standard and are asking owners to sign on to ask their contractors. We have 6-day work weeks on every project, so that's one of the things that we're trying to overcome. The time for change is now. This is the time. How will you be the hero or the heroine in this story of thinking about not just physical safety, but the mental safety of our employees? A couple of things to wrap up with, and then I think I'll have just a couple of minutes for questions, if people would like to ask questions. I know you can't read this. I don't expect you to read this. Some of you may know I did my PhD, which they tell me PhD in construction stands for post-hole digger, which I believe. I did my PhD because I got really curious about leadership and change and agility, and how do leaders create cultures that are nimble. And I studied 46 corporations, 126 business units, where I measured leader behaviors and agility, agile routines. And the construction companies on the top were the red companies. I joke I had to move to Australia because I asked so many favors of all my friends who were CEOs of companies. Was the highest in agility scores. Bad news for the engineers, there were only 3 of you, but you were at the bottom. But one of them was very high. But I studied this whole leadership and agility. I want to go back to agility related to these big rocks. It's about focusing on what your priorities are. What is really critical, and what levers are you trying to pull in the industry to make a difference? How are you standing up on this stage 5 years from now talking about the amazing change you've helped lead in our industry? And when you talk about leader behaviors that support agility, I'm going to save you reading my 172-page dissertation from 2018. This is what I learned from my study. That leaders that have very agile organizations promote exploratory behaviors. You support a culture of discovering new ways to solve problems. That's what Ed was talking about, right? I'm responsible for finding new ways of doing things, but how you really promote that with your teams. Giving people latitude, leadership behaviors that provide employees with a high degree of freedom and responsibility, not micromanaging them, giving them the ability to come up with solutions on their own. Being visionary, that's what I'm asking you to do today with these big rocks in your jars. Leader behaviors that create clear organization, purpose, and mission, and the why. And then reflective. This is a really interesting point because I want you all specifically to think about this. Leadership behaviors that cause the leader to challenge their own assumptions and create mechanisms for the organization to do so as well, to challenge our assumptions, challenge our bias. We've always done it this way. Well, maybe there's a new way of doing things. And to have the courage to put that stake in the ground. So I want to go back to the beach. I'd like to go back to the beach. Actually, in 2 weeks, I am going back to the beach. And this reflective process of thinking about the rocks in your jar and how to not to drown in the sand and the little pebbles. We have to have the sand and the pebbles in our jar, right? But to make sure we're focusing as leaders on those really impactful things we can do to move our team, our organization, and our industry forward in these 6 themes. Where are your big rocks in the jar? And how do you answer these key questions about how you drive change, what you're demanding, and how you're creating value in the supply chain of the industry? I put together a list of some of my podcasts that relate to either leadership, construction. You'll see Mike Stahn. I did one with him about the lean thing. You'll see Stephen Mulva. There's some in Australia. Alison Myram, CEO of a big construction company there. Some podcasts on culture and strategy and on organization agility. Again, you can find me on Spotify, the Greatness Podcast. And I really want to thank you for sticking with me today. Free drinks from me for everybody at Cocktail. Oh, wait, that's from Greg and Palmer, the free drinks tonight. But thank you very much for your attention.
Nevertheless, let's give it up. Hold tight. So we've got several questions, Gretchen.
Are
the first
easy?
one, yeah, I think they're interesting. The first one is, how does an owner drive any of the changes we've talked about when the board of directors who needs to approve these changes, or the senior management, find it financially painful to do so in the short term? However, I understand they have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder return.
Yep.
Any advice to how to deal with upstairs?
Yes. You need a seat at the table to begin with. So I read a great article in my PhD about how finance got the first seat at the table, marketing got the second seat at the table, and HR got the third. And construction needs to have the fourth. So you need to be viewed as a strategic asset to the organization, not just, I have one owner, not in this room, that said that the business unit started building things without the construction area because the construction area was so slow and cumbersome and not seen as a value creator. So when you build that you get that seat at the table and you have that credibility, then they'll recognize you when you say, hey, if we do this, it may be a little bit more painful in the short term, although they just had great results on their first shot at doing something different. So I think that strategic seat at the table is really, really important, or at least moving that way.
Thank you. Owner personnel often think that the benefit of change when it relates to contractors' work schedule, workforce is actually the contractor's issue and not the owner's issue. What are the arguments you use to tell owners why they should push for innovation in a contractor's sphere of work?
Why the owner should push for innovation? Well, I mean, yeah. That's a really complicated question, but I think we all need to be pushing for innovation in a team way. It's us collectively, and it's not the us and them. I think that's the underlying thing, that it's not an adversarial relationship, and I'm worried about that you're going to do something that's not in my best interest. I mean, if we understand that everybody's doing, back to what this team talked about, one team and in the best interest of everything, then we can all advocate for innovation.
Indeed. Spending time in Australia myself, says the Inquirer, I found it impressive how the culture has adapted toward positioning construction trades in a positive way. The kids are not pressured, it seems, into college like they are in the United States. Aussies encourage, mentor, and position kids for their best success. Any advice for us here in the States?
Yeah, so I actually studied this in my second master's. Germany has one of the best models. So I don't know exactly how they do it in Australia because my kids are grown and I don't have kids over there in the school system. But Germany, I think it's 70% of high school students have gone through some kind of an apprenticeship before they graduate, and private industry puts billions of dollars into it, so they see all this whole spectrum of everything they can be, from that it's not all about going to college. You can, be a graphic designer, get a 2-year degree in this, or a tradesperson or whatever. So I think we just need to keep educating people about the wonderful nature of our industry, and that to raise up that respect we have for the trades, because it's really amazing. I tried to get my daughter to go be a pipe welder, but she wouldn't do it.
She went into accounting instead.
Yes, exactly. But I'm trying to get her in the industry.
So this is an interesting question. I totally support what you say about mental health. However, how far can we go without our questioning, quote, how are you doing, being perceived as intrusive?
Yeah. I'm not a trained psychologist. I think that in the same way we train people to look for people under the influence and things, we're training people to look for those warning signs. It's not like walking up to you every day, Greg, are you okay? Greg, are you sure you're okay? It's like, oh gosh, this person seems like they're not fully present. I'm gonna go check in with them. We can only take that so far, but if we start with having that empathy for them as human beings and being present to maybe something being wrong, we've all had friends, right? Where you say, gosh, something's wrong with Sally or Joe or whatever. And I think that's what we're trying to get people to do, is look out for one another, not intrude.
Thank you. Another question says you came up with 6 core topics for your interviews. If you had to have come up with 8 or 9, what would the next 3 be?
Wow. So those 6 themes came out of the questions. I asked things like, what do you see as our biggest challenge? What keeps you lying awake at night? What should be on all our radars? So they were very open-ended questions. They weren't, how do you feel about technology or whatever. The technology and all the themes came out of those questions. So it was kind of a qualitative research study. Oh, gosh. So really, they were so open-ended that everything...
Hard to tell.
Yeah, everything was kind of... But they were very common. These were things, as you could see from that's why I did all the quotes that lots of people were talking about.
Now, I may have missed this, but the question comes in, so I'm going to ask it. We've got time for one more. It says, why 12 days? Now, where in the presentation did the Inquirer ask the question, why 12 days?
Oh, on the beach. I'll tell you, because my husband came to the United States for 3 weeks. to visit his kids in Denver. We're in alternating months of being in the United States. I came back in November and he came here in December, and I left the day after Christmas and I had to be back with the client in 12 days. So I took every possible day that I could on the beach in the middle of nowhere. That's a 5-kilometer beach, and the most people I ever saw were 8 on that beach.
Let that visual sink in. Wouldn't you like to be there right now? It's probably 60 degrees outside. And with that, let's thank our friend Gretchen for an excellent presentation.
Thank you.